There had to have been a struggle. Where that mirror was broken was the inside corner. There was blood that was washed off the mirror. There was blood that was washed off the wall.
I don't like a lot of people. I don't know what to do.
It was an open vitamin water. I drank it.
And he got sick.
Imagine you're young, strong, love fitness, and generally live a healthy life. However, all that ceases to be vital due to a string of tragic events, as a result of which you soon find yourself chained to a hospital bed, fighting for your life. This was exactly what happened to Brandon Embry. On September the 13th, 2019, depending heavily on a life support system, Brandon unfortunately passed away. The autopsy concluded that Brandon died of pneumonia. However, a series of, to put it mildly, very strange circumstances led his mother Sarah and the rest of the family to believe otherwise. This is a story about a young man who lost his life way before his time, and a story about a tireless mother who decided to take matters in her own hands, looking for answers and ultimately justice. Brandon Embry was born on September 7, 1986 in Louisville, Kentucky. He was raised by his mother Sarah and his stepfather Reg, along with two siblings, a sister named Rachel and a younger brother, Scott. The family was no stranger to exploring new and exciting things, so it is no surprise they moved and traveled frequently. They loved the outdoors and nature, so they often went on road trips and hiking, having a good time and enjoying family bonding. Unlike Scott, who was more engaged and interested in social life, Brandon was more of a person who liked spending most of the time with himself. However, that didn't stop him from playing football all the way up to high school like his brother. He loved reading, was excellent in math, showed interest in science and history, and even competed in spelling bees as a young student. At 18 years old, after graduating from high school, he enlisted into the US Navy as a nuclear machinist mate. This was very exciting news since both Sarah and Reg had a military background. After passing all tests and training, Brandon was ready to take a leap into his career. Spending a good amount of time aboard nuclear submarines at sea, he also dealt with some physical difficulties regarding his size. Brandon was a big guy, at 6 foot tall and about 245 pounds, which was considered hefty for his workplace, and he would often joke and complain to Sarah how he feels like a sardine in a can under the ocean. Unfortunately, after 6 years in the Navy, he was forced to go out due to a back injury and PTSD. After 6 years, it was time parents, but he wanted to stay independent by all means, so he did various jobs to support himself and found new interests along the way, such as different tastes in music and playing video games that he loved even as a child. He also got into the Viking culture, nurturing their look with a beard and tattoos, and he even bought his little sister a Viking costume for Halloween. However, after a few years, he decided he wanted to go back to school. He enrolled in a local community college called Green River for welding and associates at Everett Community College in Seattle. After getting his degree, he moved on to the University of Washington, where he planned to finish a 4-year engineering degree. At that point, his family were no longer living in Seattle, and he was alone with his girlfriend. Very soon he started to feel huge financial pressure and he even got a part-time job while being a full-time student, but things were just not working out. He was forced to end his relationship, drop out of college and move back in with his family one more time. This time they were settled in Randolph County. Because of the skills he possessed, finding work wasn't an issue. He soon moved to the nearby city of Asheboro in the apartment with his new girlfriend, from where he traveled to Texas and Detroit to work. Things were finally looking good for Brandon, but unfortunately, they will only go downhill from there. Along with back problems which he carried on from the Navy, he also had problems with low testosterone levels, and he had to administer hormone shots often, which is why he was carrying needles with him most of the time. According to Sarah, he also suffered from sleep apnea and also had some shoulder injury which he developed while working at a soup factory. However, he was a big, strong guy who dealt with his physical problems in the best way he could. That is, until February 2019, when things started to get more serious. While being at work at Greensboro and after not feeling well, his employer was concerned and advised Brandon to go and seek medical care, which he did. Along the way, he decided to get some quick food at McDonald's to see if he would feel better. However, shortly after arriving, he started vomiting and had very bad abdominal pain. He was literally folding in pain, to which someone quickly called 911 and Brandon was soon admitted to ER in a stage of unconsciousness. After he spent 5 days in a hospital, he was discharged, but he had no recollection of the events whatsoever. An even stranger fact is that his blood test came completely clear, so nobody could answer why this scary episode actually happened. Everything was good for nearly 2 months, and in late April he had yet another major health scare. Around 7:30 a.m. when he was at work, he suddenly felt very hot and soon passed out, falling to the ground and hitting his head along the way. Luckily nothing happened and he soon woke up and by miracle continued his work until the same situation occurred only about an hour later. Brandon was admitted to the ER again with the same symptoms as the last time: vomiting, abdominal pain, nausea, and of course, headache. They ran his blood and again nothing seemed to be out of the ordinary. However, Brandon started to question what was actually going on with him. He didn't take any substances, he was in form, eating healthy, and there was no reason for something like this to happen. He recovered and moved on, but with very few answers. Then, a similar situation happened in June, but without blacking out. Again, not a single indicator. It was August 2019 and Brandon had found a job based out of Charlotte, NC, an hour and a half away from Asheboro. Sarah and family were helping him to pack his belongings together, but there wasn't much work to be done. He hadn't really unpacked from his initial move-in. Due to his constant traveling and moving, his apartment was still a bit messy, and this small detail will prove to be a crucial factor soon. He was fired in early September because of the state of his hotel room while on a work trip in Detroit. Staff complained about his messiness, making it impossible for Brandon to stay. They took photos of his belongings and prescription medications. However, what is worth mentioning is the fact that this is actually illegal per Michigan state law. The project ended early, so he returned from Detroit and went back to work the next day on Friday, when he was fired. Shaken but in good spirits, Brandon went to his mom's house and explained what happened. He was in a good mood and was looking forward to the next potential job. The next day, Sarah went to Kentucky to pick up Rachel while Brandon was staying at home with the dogs. They got back home in the evening, however, he had already left by that time because he had plans to meet with his girlfriend and Sarah figured he wanted to celebrate his special day with her. She did manage to speak with him earlier during their trip and wish him all the best for his birthday. On Monday, September 9, Brandon texted his mother and told her he had a bad headache, which was terrible timing because he had a lot of stuff that he needed to take care of. The next morning, Tuesday the 10th, Brandon texted Sarah very early. However, these messages will cause a doubt after his death, and as we go more deeply into this case, you will know why. She called her son back later that day, but he didn't answer and didn't call back, which was unusual. Sarah tried to reach him several times the day after. Without any response, she ultimately decided to go to his apartment on Thursday with Rachel. After no response, 911 was called, and this was the time when the nightmare began. Brandon was discovered lying naked on the floor in a very bad shape. He was barely breathing, had multiple injuries all over his body, such as cuts, scratches, bruises. He was simply fighting for his life. He was quickly taken to a nearby Asheboro hospital, but was soon transferred to Greensboro because of a higher level of care. Unfortunately, his condition was very bad, and at the time the doctors didn't have any good news for the family. Ultimately, and without any hope, Brandon unfortunately passed away the next day at 8:57 p.m. What the hell happened? The man who was in a good mood and celebrated his birthday just a couple of days ago was now dead without any explanation. Police immediately begin searching his apartment for possible clues, and it is not enough to say they have had an extremely difficult job to do, because Brandon's apartment was looking like a bomb had been dropped. Numerous things all over the place. Food, drinks, broken dishes, torn boxes, dirty clothes, even small rocks, among many other things. Sarah was aware that Brandon was a bit messy, but this was beyond messiness. It looked more like someone trashed the entire place up, and their suspicions were amplified when it came to the bathroom. The pipes were leaking, so the floor was soaked. The porcelain cover to the tank was broken in half. The seat cover was ripped off the toilet bowl, and the bathroom mirror was broken into pieces. Besides the obvious blood that surrounded Brandon's body, they also found a pillow that had tons of bloodstains on it. The police also got a warrant to search his truck, which was in no different condition from the apartment. Food and empty cans lying everywhere. Was this some rampage episode by Brandon before blacking out, or was it something else? Something much more sinister. On Monday morning around 11 a.m., examiners began an autopsy on Brandon's body. Because Brandon was unconscious and wasn't able to say a single word, this was the only way to determine what actually happened and what is the cause of his death. Like I said before, Brandon's entire body was covered with wounds ranging from cuts, scratches, bruises, so it was clear that examiners will have their hands full with work. Starting from the head, besides all cuts, he also had discoloration around his eyes, aka the raccoon eyes, a condition that is associated with a skull fracture. His torso was covered in bruises, and he had contusions on his back that were consistent with being struck with a hard object, like a baseball bat. Both his legs and arms were not different. Many scratches with a small puncture wound on his left hand wrist and palm, the type of injury that usually indicates self-defense. According to the medical staff in Greensboro Hospital, his condition was in similar state as someone who just got hit by a car. So, what was the initial theory? Well, the police thought that Brandon was actually under the influence of drugs, which caused him to go on a total rampage and, as they put it, beat himself. All allegedly because of the methamphetamine, which is known as a psychoactive drug that causes erratic behavior. But we said that Brandon was living a healthy lifestyle, trained, and his mother says the use of drugs was just not something that was going along with his personality, especially because he was often drug tested at work. But Detective Johnson strictly insisted that meth was something that was highly possible because, according to her, the apartment was very cold when they arrived, and that is something which is typical for meth users. Although Sarah immediately told her that her son had a hormone condition that made him always hot, so he typically kept his AC on a 62 degrees, Detective Johnson went back to her theory. As she said, meth users often have strange behavior, and Brandon likely started cleaning up the mess after making it. Let's stop here and think about this briefly. So, Brandon was in his apartment under the influence of illegal substances. He then begins to trash the entire place up, and after realizing what he has done, he then starts to clean everything. But in that process, he somehow decides it is a good time to beat himself nearly to death. According to wrist and palm injuries, in that process he defended from himself as well, and he also struck himself with a hard object on his back. Does this make any sense whatsoever? The lead detective on the case was Jeremy Surratt, who was soon promoted, so the investigation was taken over by mentioned Detective Johnson. I will now play the actual call that took place between Sarah and detective, so you can hear and evaluate, let's say, a level of honesty.
Toilet was ripped up out of the ground. And even if you fall on a toilet, I mean, that takes, there was struggle. The drywall bashed in. I went in my own house and tried to throw myself against the wall. And you know what? The drywall doesn't give. There had to have been a struggle. Where that mirror was broken was the inside corner. You know, like that, there was blood that was washed off. There was blood that was washed off the mirror. There was blood that was washed off the wall. There was so much blood in that apartment. Then the coroner tells me that there wasn't very much blood at the scene. I have the photos and the water that he laid after he went down on the ground. Pardon?
I'm still here. What I want to do, I don't mind talking, but I wanted to sit down and talk to you. I know I met you over there at the apartment.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to meet with you so I can talk to you about what I have started doing and who I've contacted. Right now, I have got assistance where we're allowed with the SBI when we have cases. They can't come in and take over like a homicide. They can come in and take over like agencies that don't that are shorthanded, like say Ramsor. If they have a homicide, or they come in and they assist the officer with that because they're limited on how many officers because it's a small town. Okay, Agent Campbell has been assigned to our county in our jurisdiction, right? Well, I contacted him because he was down here on another case, and while he was here, I spoke with him.
Sarah was telling Johnson about all the blood at a crime scene, but a medical examiner said there wasn't very much blood. She also said that she has all the photos of the blood and the sign of a struggle when Johnson said, "Stop." Sarah thinks it is because she wanted her to stop talking on the recorded line, and she also wondered if they didn't show all the photos to the medical examiner and what else was withheld from the doctor. Jeremy Surratt was thinking differently, and he also requested another search warrant as he believed there were traces of a possible cleanup. Despite the medical staff's opinions and the obvious signs of trauma and a struggle in the apartment, the autopsy results came in, listing Brandon's cause of death as pneumonia. Really, inflammation of the lungs, besides all other injuries which were, to put it mildly, very suspicious. This didn't make any sense to Sarah and the rest of the family, as it doesn't make sense to me and probably you as well. Furious about this decision, Sarah started taking photos of the apartment herself and put all the pieces together, because at that point it was clear that the investigation was not going in the right direction. And on February 27, 2020, after 5 months, Detective Johnson closed Brandon's case. Murder was ruled out, a robbery gone wrong was ruled out, and the official reason was natural death. Like any sane person out there, this wasn't going to be an end to a mother like Sarah, who knew it was only the beginning of an exhausting